Yeah. So I recently wrote a little review. I tried to see if there's any scientific evidence for chakras, and my God, it's one of my most read papers. It was a short little review because there's very little scientific experiments on it. I'm still working on a survey of chakra experiences because I found that if you bring white light up your body, you can actually have images at different images at different chakras. Basically, you can sort of see the psychic contents of those different chakras, which then gives credence to the idea that the chakras have different functions. So people, because that's, where did they get the idea? Where did they get the idea? How do we test that? So the whole chakras, and then the whole thing with my magnetic field, I haven't talked about, is that was recording from the heart chakra. That was because I found if I put it to other places, the magnetometer, it wasn't getting as much. But I do know that there's other so my gut is that I'm getting an emission from the heart chakra for these sessions. So it seems to be, I don't know. It just, I think the chakras are emitting waves, frequencies. And as a healer, you see light going into some of these chakras, spontaneous light going into the chakras, and you're like, oh my God, you see it. All you do is you catalyze, and all of a sudden the light comes in where it needs to come in. It's pretty amazing.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Dr. Bernard Beitman. I'm a psychiatrist. Yeah, I study meaningful coincidences. You can order my book, which is got the cover in the back over my shoulder. Tune in to my Psychology Today posts about this last one about the moon and the sun, and that solar eclipse we had is a pretty amazing cosmic coincidence, and you can interpret it however you want. I've got plenty of ideas about it. Please like us, send me some of your questions and comments about this and other posts on YouTube, and I'll be glad to respond to them. I'm going to start with a story that will be relevant to our guest today. I was down by the river here in Charlottesville, Virginia. I was talking on the phone with my therapist, having a good time watching the river flow. And right when I finished that conversation, two people from dance, I go to dance several times a week and pick up the energy with people. And these were two fairly high energy people who have been together for quite a while, who came walking over to me right when I finished talking on the phone with my therapist. The timing of that was just so exquisite. I was ready to see them. I had seen them before earlier on in the day, and they came right when they should have come. It was perfect timing. How does that work? A simple everyday coincidence. Well, maybe we'll get a little clue about how that works from the person that we're talking with today. Quite an amazing woman as I've been getting to know her. Her name is Margaret Moga, and she is a neuroanatomist. That's the way she started, but she ain't doing that now, ladies and gentlemen. She's doing some other stuff, and you'll find out how that happened. She's a medical educator, and she's got a lot to teach us. And most importantly for our discussion, she's a subtle energy researcher. She has 40 peer-reviewed papers in examining the neural pathways of the central autonomic nervous system. But here we've got it, magnetic field changes during energy healing. Magnetic field changes, she measures them during energy healing. She studies exceptional experiences of healers and the scientific basis of chakras. Her current research interests are developing scientific measures of energy healing and exceptional human experiences. I love that, man. They're putting numbers on what we kind of know. can feel it. Some of us who are out there, and she's one of them. There's stuff going on here, and we can't see it. We can feel it. She's measuring it. We can get visual with it. As a complement to her research, she completed training as a practitioner in healing touch, which is an energy-based biofield therapy, and was recently president of the nonprofit organization Society for Scientific Exploration. These guys are on the edge of science, and she's a scientist on the edge, and she's some good stuff for us to be able to pay attention to. Margaret, welcome to Connecting with Coincidence.
Yeah, thank you, Bernie. Thank you.
I'm very glad to have you. I'm glad we had our preliminary discussion about biofields, magnetic fields, and other things in the psychosphere. But why don't you tell us the story about how a nice conventional neuroanatomist, just going about her day, measuring the autonomic nervous system or something, and getting pictures of it and describing it. How'd you get into measuring energy fields, as particularly biofields, with healers?
Well, there were some early, influences early on, but the big one, of course, was in the lab in Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh. I was doing my third postdoc, which is very depressing. Postdocs are very difficult. There's no health insurance, there's no dental insurance, there's no retirement. I mean, you get paid almost nothing, and you're locked into this windowless room in a tower, and you don't even see other human beings except who you're working with. It can be very depressing. So I was a little depressed, but I was still doing my neuroanatomy research, some beautiful papers in Pittsburgh, and I had come across some books on India, and I'd started reading in that area on Eastern philosophies, and I come across a woman named Mother Mira from in a book, Hidden Journeys, and so I just was impressed. I don't know, there's something. Oh, I know, I'd had a powerful dream with her by reading that book about her, about the Great Mother. There was a Jungian sort of archetype of the fountain, and I thought, wow, that's cool. That's really cool. Maybe there's something to this divine mother thing. And so I just, as I was being sort of depressed, locked into this very, dark, sort of gloomy lab. And I wrote her a letter and said, can you help me? I didn't know how she was going to help me. And so I'm sitting there one day doing experiments. You wait for reactions to occur. You're just sitting at the bench. And all of a sudden I knew she wanted me to be happy. And I felt this stuff around me. It was palpable. I could feel it's like an inner tube of light energy. It was palpable. I could feel this stuff come into my field. And I was like, oh my God. And so it was amazing. And what helped me was I couldn't think any just depressing thoughts. I was buoyed up by this energy she poured into me. And within a week, I received a letter from Stanford saying, come on out and give a talk on your neuroanatomy, out of the blue. And so that got me going. That got me, hustling to get more data. And then I had a note on my desk, very curiously. The janitor had left a note saying, can I read one of your books? And I bought a bunch of books, and I was really too depressed, literally, to look at the books. I just throw them up there and I looked at them. And so he got me curious. I pulled the books down and I started to read them, and I loaned him the book. And then I got back into going in the library and looking things up. And so I got moving again because I really was depressed. I joked that I was doing my drug of choice was chocolate. I was starting out with Snicker bars at 9 a.m. To feel better. And so, and then the last synchronicity was in the library. I picked up a book on acupuncture out of curiosity, and I was leafing through it. And somehow this point called Joy of Life showed up. And I realized that I had tenderness, the joy life points inside my elbows, and I had rubbed them. So I had literally, it's the point for depression, is to rub that acupressure point. And so I thought, this is weird. This is really weird. And so I had a sense that the synchronicities were more unbelievable to me, because basically I had a very quiet postdoc life. I mean, I was, doing outside things. I was in a Jungian psychology book club, was fun. I was doing Tai Chi, but I was depressed. And this lifted me out. And the critical thing is feeling that energy from the energy healing. I could actually touch it, basically palpate it, feel it, It was sensory. It was a sensory thing. And that opened me to the idea of energy healing. That was the big moment, because then later on I joined ICEAM. I went to the subtle energy meetings in Colorado, and I heard other speakers. I felt other sensations. I had an amazing sensation. I was listening to a nurse demonstrate healing touch. And I was sitting in the audience, and I could feel the energy as she did the magnetic passes. And I was like, oh my God, I have to check this out. And that was the second pivotal experience where I started taking healing touch courses. But it had started with this Mother Mira healing from a distance. And then I started to meet healers. And then I could feel other sensations. And it was just like, oh my God. And because I was a neuroanatomist, I'm very body based. I'm like, well, if I can feel it, I can measure it. And so I just, I'm in a medical school. It's like, of course we can measure it. If we can feel it, it's all, nerve pathways, nerve endings, anyway, but that's my story.
If I can feel it, I can measure it. I've thought that for 30 years when I felt the energy between my patients and me. And I was looking around for somebody to measure it. And finally found somebody in Richmond, Virginia, who could do some of that, but you're doing it. And I'm interested not just in the interpersonal healing, but actually, I think about psychotherapy as interpersonal healing too. We don't pay attention to that. I just recognize that, so that, okay, well, I have to think about that one for a while, because it's a form of interpersonal healing. The healing, like Reiki, tends to be more one way. Like Mother Mira went to you.
Yes.
And there's something about the interaction between the patient and the therapist in psychotherapy that's different. So it's a dynamic interchange that makes it look different. But we might get back into that. But let's look at your story. And one of the implications was that you ran across her. You wrote a letter to Mother Mira.
Yes.
You felt the energy, and that was okay. If I feel it, I can measure it. I love that. I mean, that's what we need more of, paying attention, and you can try to measure it. But then you had a couple of synchronicities. The letter from Stanford. What a wonderful thing to happen.
It was a sleep lab in Stanford, and I was studying circadian rhythm pathways in the brain. And so that's what they wanted me to come out and talk about. So it was like, oh, wow, and it's like, okay, this is fun, and so that was helpful. It was very helpful. Yeah. And the book that the janitor wanted to read was Cycles. It was once again about the cycles. And that was an amazing book. I think it's out of print now, but
he got you to be able to want to read, among other things, what you read. And then you find the acupuncture book that confirms your rubbing of the inside of your elbow.
Yes, that was weird.
And that whole sequence opened you up. And you ask a good question, Margaret, a question that I maybe will get into that I don't have good answers to, is when you start opening up to energy fields, does that increase your experience of synchronicities? I'm pretty sure that does, which is why I told the story at the beginning about these two people from dance who are very positive energy people with whom I resonate. And that's an important idea, being able to resonate with other people. And what we mean by resonate and frequencies, we might get into, because it's such an important idea. But you asked that question, but then you get into some studies of energy, particularly healing energy. Could you tell us some about those?
Well, there's the big one was the copper wall experiment down there at Manager Clinic. It basically measured body voltage potential of healers, and they had these big surges and discharges. I think that's one of the big ones. And then there was another, some research scientists in Japan who showed magnetic field oscillations from a Qigong masters. Very interesting. So there was some, there was these experiments that were out there. They're small in number. And so I knew, and then there was the big one was Zimmerman, Dr. Zimmerman and University of Colorado. He actually did the squid, a very sensitive magnetometer with a single person. and show once again the magnetic field oscillations in a very sensitive magnetometer. And I use a less sensitive. It's still sensitive, but not as sensitive as his. And I'm seeing the exact same oscillations. And so they start out, they change frequency, and they're like a packet. They get up, go up in frequency, go down, go up, and then go down. It's like this wave packet. And he saw that with a different type of magnetometer. And so I confirmed what he'd seen, basically.
What did he see? What was it? I mean, what's the picture? You're saying these waves went on from the healer to
They were doing, I think they were doing distant healing. So he was recording from near the healer. These waves, they're in the environment. They're they're oscillations. So the magnetic field, if you have some, in the room, yes.
What's a magnetic field?
Well, the Earth produces a magnetic field. It's huge. And so we produce magnetic fields with the beating of our heart, basically. It's all those ions in the blood, and the ion changes in the muscle. Muscles actually have magnetic fields because they're creating current. Most people think of nerves as creating current, but muscles create current. And so because they create current, there's an associated magnetic field with the current. And so that's the nervous system is creating a current. That's why the EG, you're measuring the currents, but there's also a very small magnetic field around the brain too. So so there's these magnetic fields in our environment, like the refrigerators create big magnetic fields. They've got all this current, and they're condensers and fans, and so they have a magnetic field. So when we have this magnetic field storm, from the solar flare, there's oscillations in the Earth's magnetic field, but they're very slow. It almost looks like the ocean. So what I'm recording looks like little wavelets on top of this big undulating ocean. That's the Earth magnetic field. That's a lot.
It's a lot. And are you, when you're talking about the slow oscillations of the Earth, are you talking about Schumann resonance?
No, I'm talking about when there's an actual storm. When there's not a storm, it's quiet. It's in the frequencies I look at, 0 to 30 hertz. It's very quiet. It's just with the big storms, magnetic field storms from a big solar flare hitting the Earth. Then you get these. They're beautiful. They're big, slow oscillations in the field. I'm sure they're affecting us some way.
Yeah, I'm sure they're affecting us in some way also. It's got to be the case. When you talk about these oscillating fields,
yes,
would you? It does. One question I've had is: do ions floating through our blood circulatory system add to the magnetic field of the human body?
Yes, I think they do. There's a wonderful, it's back the original study in 1971, a highly shielded experiment of where the magnetic field was coming from. And that was the original, like Cohen, 1971. I think it was in Science. He found it was mainly the heart was the big one because it's regular. All those muscles are beating together. That's why it's big. They're all doing the same current, the same beat together. And then there was another one in the lower abdomen, like the Dantian of Eastern martial arts. Is kind of interesting. And then there's these other little ones with the muscles, because skeletal muscles are, like I said, people don't expect there's a current with muscle. People don't know that.
Yeah, so there's several sources, and the brain being one of them, but not as strong as some of the muscle ones, and certainly not as strong as the heart.
Right.
How can individuals influence their own biomagnetic field?
Through, emotions is a big one. Emotions. I know that we can, exercise. So these little fields I'm measuring, we seem to charge up and discharge all the time. So exercise is amazing. We get these little discharges. So if you tense your muscle and then release it, I see this little discharge. So that's what the exercise is doing. It's clearing the body of charge buildup. You're literally doing lots of little releases, and that's why it's so healthy. Energetically, it's healthy because you're releasing tension. I mean, that's, people find that, right? You do exercise and like, oh, I feel much better. I feel more relaxed. Well, you've just released and released. and release. And the same thing with emotional, right? You talk to someone, you have something heavy on your chest, and you let it go. You talk and you talk and talk, and then boom, I see these big waves. I mean, it's like literally it's coming off of you, these big waves that come off you. You've had a release. And that's why it's so important, like with trauma release, we see that with energy healing. These big waves, people are just, I mean, they've got this tension that's in there, and it's just like big waves, and then it's gone. It's on. It's amazing. It's yeah, it's another world. It's another world. I just wish yeah, well, I'm influencing younger investigators now, because the next generation is more open to this. My generation was not. I mean, I had a lot of trouble with rejection and people thinking I was, I was crazy. But I'm meeting young people, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, this is cool," So, yeah, I'm looking forward to what's coming.
I agree. It's cool. And I've been one of those young people who got older. I knew there was something to it. And
Yeah.
here you're making it clear there is something to it by being able to measure it. Now, when we talk about energy fields, magnetic fields to be specific, but it's other ones too, certain emotions have certain signatures. Is that correct?
There's I haven't done it down to that analysis, I guess. But what's the strange one for me is that if you express love and you're filling the room with love, you're clearing the room with love, it becomes like glass. It quiets everything. It's amazing. It's the opposite of what you would think of it as an emotion. It's like the ground. It's like the ground of being. Literally, it becomes quiet. And so if you're a healer, you're doing the right thing. If you could clear a room like that, you're heart centered. You've made it, I think. So, but the big ones, I had one where we were very tense in the lab. People were all, there's this tension, and then I was recording a control in the lab, and I see these jagged waves, big jagged waves, and I was like, whoa, tension! Like you can cut it with a knife. I was like, oh my god, I think we better calm down here. And I had the example in my paper, magnetic field paper with a healing touch. You would like this. I was taking volunteers, all different types of volunteers, and this woman walks in, and I can feel something. I was like, oh no. Because I want people who are, anyway. She sits down, she says, I have borderline personality disorder. I was like, oh my God. And of course, in her recording, her waves are like this. They're just too much. It's just too much stuff. She couldn't get peaceful. And so, yeah. So I wish everyone could see their own waves, because it is an eye-opener for me. I had to learn on doing these experiments. I had to learn how to be very peaceful, very observer, very quiet, because my waves, I literally setting up my waves could start reverberations that would go on for hours. I had to learn to keep my stuff very quiet. And so I mean, it's very important. I wish we could all see this. Yeah.
I can still see you still have some of that going on, and it is a high frequency, fairly high intensity vibe that you emit.
Oh, sorry.
No, I want to get to that, because I think each of us has a fundamental energy signature.
Yes.
What do you think of that idea?
Yes, it's yes, I just gave a talk on Know Your Magnetic Field. There was a healer. Oh God, now his name it'll take me a minute to come back to. He was an amazing healer. And he God, what's his name? He said that each person has combinations of like 3 frequencies. And that's why some people resonate together because those frequencies resonate together, and other people don't resonate together. And he didn't have any judgment about it. He said, yes, there's a frequency thing that's different from different people. And that's why some people should be together and why some shouldn't be married. He said it will weaken. If you're dissonant, it's going to weaken both of your fields. You're both going to have illnesses. That's what he would tell people.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I am so much a believer in that, which is why sometimes one spouse dies. because they
Yes.
stay together. And this thinking in terms of energy and frequency among and between people seems to me a simpler way of understanding human conflict. It's not the only way, but
Yes.
it's a fundamentally basic way. But let me ask you a different question. Something that happened to me. I went to my first breathwork session with
Ah,
someone who's a Reiki healer, and we were doing holotropic breath work. That one.
yes. Yes.
And I had never done it before and it was still new, but I got into it and I, I, I became an eagle flying and some other things. I saw an owl. But the most important thing for our discussion is that she came along as she does for each session and with each person and touched me on my right shoulder. When she did that, I had this ecstatic burst of what I called and call divine love. I had the feeling of divine love, and it was so intense that I almost couldn't hold it. I was crying. I was I was almost laughing. I was filled with joy. I don't have a good name for it. I was bursting with what seemed like tremendously positive energy that seemed to come, I thought, from some divine source that was also related to her. And what I thought had happened is that our souls had touched, that our souls had kissed, is another way of saying it. When I asked her about it, she said, I catalyzed that reaction in you. She was doing the healing. It had nothing to do with her. I'm not sure that's the case, but I'll never know. The feeling I had, which would have been nice to measure magnetically, became something that I had to almost yogically become disciplined to manage because it was so intense. It would come and it would go. Often when I would think about her or be around her, that I would feel this divine love, which after a while I was able to keep it inside of me without going crying and feeling a lot. And I think it transformed me. I transformed my heart, transformed my way of being interpersonally with people. I think I became more attuned to the love that you're describing that can happen in a room.
Yes. Yeah, but you're describing what some of the spiritual seekers have described with gurus, with teachers, like Irina Tweedy was one. She describes her path, and she describes what very similar to what you're saying. It was a catalyst, is a teacher basically catalyzed, and you had a series of reactions. Then it's like a reverberations, right? I mean, yeah, but there's almost the Kundalini aspect in there also because they talk about having repeat things that are triggered, very powerful energies that, as you say, how did you create that? I mean, you didn't create that. So as you say, soul, that's a good, I think it's a very good description. Yeah. For what is reverberating, but very beautiful. Thank you. That's perfect.
You're welcome. And thank you for being interested in it because I, like you, I like saying, what was that?
That's right. Right. How can I bottle that? I mean, some people say it that way, how can I help everyone have these experiences?
Well, the the thing about that was that I associated it with her because we were doing, as part of our getting to know each other, she was doing synchronicity talks with me. So it wasn't just that experience, and I'd known her
Wow.
before, and
Wow.
so we have done a couple of synchronicity talks together, and each time that we're together, almost every time, there's something about a closeness and an attunement with each other that is also pretty funny. I mean, if you saw us together, I thought we were really funny. She's a comedian, and
Uh-huh.
I love to laugh a lot. So we imagined, I did anyway, and I think she did too, that we were on a TV show uh, called the Galactic Television Network. So it wasn't just on Earth; it was like a bigger thing, and
Oh,
there was
wow.
and there was a coincidence, and the producer wanted to have more action between us because we had a show going on as a series. And so he got a coincidence to get us together at dance one time where neither of us arranged it, just like running into the people I told you about at the river. So there was this whole thing going on with us that became also personal. It wasn't just the healer thing, which, yes, she's probably right. She catalyzed it, but she was part of my life for a while. And just what that means interpersonally for two people to have that connection with each other is energetically something that I would like to be able to study.
It's interesting. I kept thinking that that might have been one of the initiatories for your whole. I mean, you've taken on a big project, and it's almost like a healing project here. And so she was like was she one of the initiatories that helped you this project keep going, or were there other ones, experiences like this that were? I know you've had coincidences, but that was a powerful injection of energy into this whole project that you're running.
I think it probably is true that she has helped me somehow. Uh, but I've been doing this for quite a while now. And this was like happened last year.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's that's my question. I was curious. I was
But
curious.
we did have synchronicity talks together.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, we'd had synchronicities with each other repeatedly
Uh-huh. Yeah,
that,
yeah,
that
yeah,
were pretty funny,
yeah.
where we would mirror each other. I had an eye problem, and I told her about it, and I look funny, and she had an eye problem that made her look funny at the same time. We didn't know that. We hadn't seen each other for a while.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So
Wow.
we were looking alike, metaphorically and actually.
Wow. Wow. Well, there's that whole group soul thing that we have multiple parts of our soul or on this earth at the same time. That I mean that's I don't know. You picked up on something there. Wow.
Yeah, and it's something that is related to what you're talking about, but the divine love,
Yes. Yes.
which I experienced again in under a different context. She wasn't there, but it, that has made me more tuned in to divine love because I experienced it. And one of the things that happened in one of the subsequent breathworks things is that I was in contact with her deceased father. So I was channeling her father.
Hmm. Hmm.
And why don't you tell us about you and measuring channeled people like that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was oh God, how did I get into that? Oh, okay, okay. That is another story. So I went to a healing touch class led by Vicki Slater. She's an RN PhD in physics, and so she's very interested in knowing how energy healing works. And she's actually written a very good review, saying it's a magnetic induction. So very interesting work. But anyway, so she had this circle, this class. It was in a circle in St. Louis. I drove down to St. Louis. I was late, 10 minutes late, and there was only one chair left. I was next to her. So I walk in 10 minutes late, I sit next to her, and she starts to talk about how healers can emit sound. And I'm sitting next to her, and she says, "Here." And so she puts her fingers to my ear, and I hear it. You see, I'm the only one in the room who heard it because I came in 10 minutes late. So there was a synchronicity. And so I'm fascinated by that. I'm still fascinated by that. So the quality of the sound, because she had to come this close, was like ultrasound. Because I'd had another weird experience. I was living in a house where some bats came in out of the attic, and they were trying to get out of the house. And one of them was frantic. And so it was buzzing me in the middle of the night, buzzing me right, very close to my ear. And I could hear it because if it's this close, you can hear it. It's the sound of ultrasound. It's weakened by all the air molecules. So to hear ultrasound, it has to be very close. So I thought this healer was emitting ultrasound. So I got an ultrasound detector and I thought, all right, let's see if I can find any healers who can do this. Well, I couldn't find any other healers to emit sound like she was doing, even though the healing touch technique is called ultrasound. It's actually, it's called ultrasound. Anyway, somebody else had this experience. But anyway, so I started to record during healing sessions. And I had this one healer who was a shaman, and she was pulling in the guides. She's pulling in the medicine animals. She was bringing everybody in. She was bringing everyone into that room. So I had this speaker. It was converting the ultrasound signal to audio. And all of a sudden this music, this very strange, very, very fun. It was melodic. It was fun. It was upbeat music. It wasn't something you hear on the radio. It starts coming through the speaker, and I'm thinking, what? I thought, my God, it's the guides. I thought it's the guides. That was the first thing I thought. And a few weeks later, I had another healer come in. It was silent. And I said to her later, I said, you didn't bring any guides in. She said, no, I didn't need guides today. And I thought, wow, this is really weird. They're bringing the guides in. I got this funny music, and then no guides, it's silent. And so, but the problem is that I'm not an audio technician. And there's so much trying to isolate those frequencies, trying to find that signal in this big bandwidth that I'd recorded. I wasn't able to find it. And so I probably should just, do a synchronicity, try to find someone with an audio experience who could find the signal in that big band that I recorded, because I can't find it. I can't find it. I heard it. I saw it on the screen, but I can't analyze it. So I'm sorry, but it gave me a lot of hope. And then I got very interested in that ITC, that communications from the dead, where people hear voices on radios, if they have a lot of white noise in the background. And then I had a freaky experience where a young man during COVID committed suicide, and he was the guy who cut my lawn. And so I was on a Zoom meeting one day, and all of a sudden this shadow appears on my Zoom image. I mean, it's like we're sitting here now, and there's this shadow that suddenly appears, a shape of a human. I was like, oh my God, it's him. It's like, I knew it was him. And then I got really frightened. I turned off the signal, and his father calls me just like that. And it says, oh yes, I'm burning his things. Don't be alarmed. There's a big bonfire outside his house. I was like, oh man, this is really bad. But this whole idea that we can pick up the dead with electronics, people have noticed this. And so I've actually had a little experience on it. I think that there's a different band of frequencies that we can tap into. And it seems to be because the messages that people get on radio are very short. It seems by these tiny little windows, that they can get through to us. And so, I don't know. So
my experience with this person's father,
yes,
was that first of all, he, during a breathwork thing later after that, what I told you, he told me 3 things about her. And then when I told her about them, she was quite surprised, because it was hard to know 2 of them anyway, and even a third. And so I started having a relationship with her father.
okay, yes.
And one of the funny things was that I could think about him and want to talk to him. He was right there.
Yes. Yes. I
why do you-
understand. I had that with my mother who died. And when I would think of her, I'd have this, she was a smoker, heavy cigarette smoker. So whenever I would think of her, her presence would be cigarette smoke in the middle of nowhere. It would be boom. Okay, you're here. Okay. And I knew she was, and it was comforting. It was comforting. I knew it was her, because of the cigarette smoke smell.
Padre Pio would come in with a rose smell. I think
Yes,
it was rose.
yes, that's right.
No, your mother did with tobacco. Well, aside from the radio ones,
Yes,
these being able to communicate as I was with her father, so that we're having a
Yes.
dialogue,
yes.
and we're talking about stuff that's related to her. That seems to be something that you are beginning to wonder, can you measure the magnetic field of, the magnetic emanations of?
Yes, there's some people have seen light effects too. I think
Yeah, they've seen light effects, but I'm looking at magnetic effects. magnetic that, and you haven't gotten quite to
No,
that yet.
no, I haven't seen magnetic. I think it's more of a sound thing with these, because I found I'm glad you brought it up. Magnetic field doesn't measure everything. So the random event generators are picking up something different from the magnetic field. And so this ultrasound's picking up something different from the magnetic field. So that comes back to what we were originally talking about. There's many different frequencies. And so that's part of the problem, is what to focus on. And people to understand that it's okay, that we can only get one view with magnetic fields. I can get another view with a random event generator, another view with an ultrasonic detector. And so there's different, and probably a different view for body potential, voltage potential, and also for light. People are measuring light emission, photon emission, biophotons in the lab. And some healers are very good with light, basically. So, I wanted to mention that with the Reiki healers. I've actually had strange experiences with Reiki healers where I feel like they're glowing. I feel like they're emitting a lot of light. And, so.
Well, one of experience I had was that everything is vibrating, and that everything is at different frequencies.
Yes.
That I could see that experience, that everything is different kinds of frequencies. It's seen that in different places. So what about the idea that it's all vibrating, it's all got different levels of frequency, and that's why you have to say, I need different machines to measure different frequencies?
I think so. And I was just coming back, thinking about the flow. We were talking about the flow between people, and some really good healers I've met, they talk about the flow, and even the importance for clearing our field so that we can have flow. That's a big thing, to do a self-clearing so we can experience flow, and then we can flow more with other people.
How do you clear your own field?
Well, I know that you can bring light down through your chakras, and just you quote, imagine light coming in. But I know from healing, when you start to imagine light, that can trigger light. And so it becomes a real thing that's actually doing the clearing. So there's the one with the Velo, Nancy Trivoletto teaches, where she just says, you imagine the field, you're doing ripplings to try to get everything moving, getting the flow. That's what her whole meditation technique is, getting a flow. So it clears, basically. It's because there's stuckness in certain areas. And so you want to keep moving through that. And then people talk about having, what's the word? Just more clarity, basically. They have more clear dreams, just more clarity by doing her technique, just moving, getting everything, getting rid of the stuckness, moving the flow. But for me, I tend to like to do, there's a rainbow meditation where you bring in a giant sphere of light from the soul, and you come through each chakra, go up the central channel, come through the throat, go up to the central channel. So you're clearing the chakras and the central channel. And then at some point, then you clear the whole field. But the chakras seem to be pretty important. We haven't talked about chakras, have we?
No, we haven't. And they are important. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. So I recently wrote a little review. I tried to see if there's any scientific evidence for chakras. And my God, it's one of my most read papers. It was a short little review because there's very little scientific experiments on it. I'm still working on a survey of chakra experiences, because I found that if you bring white light up your body, you can actually have images at different images at different chakras. Basically, you can sort of see the psychic contents of those different chakras, which then gives credence to the idea that the chakras have different functions. So people, because that's, where did they get that idea? Where did they get the idea? How do we test that? So the whole chakras, and then the whole thing with my magnetic field I haven't talked about, is that I was recording from the heart chakra. That was because I found if I put to other places the magnetometer, it wasn't getting as much. But I do know that there's other. So my gut is that I'm getting an emission from the heart chakra for these sessions. So it seems to be, I don't know. It just I think the chakras are emitting waves, frequencies. They're and as a healer, you see light going into some of these chakras, spontaneous light going into the chakras, and you're like, oh my God, there it go. You know, you see it. All you do is you catalyze, and all of a sudden the light comes in where it needs to come in. It's pretty amazing. So
This, I mentioned this biofield measurement,
yes,
and you could see the throat chakra.
yes,
You could see it as a circle, almost like the lotuses that people are describing.
yes.
So,
Okay.
so you could see it. I mean, and there was also a little bit of heart involved. I didn't. This one was a little confused for various reasons, but it's visualizable. I've seen it. The chakras are real, electromagnetically or magnetically, and you're using more refined measures than the visual I had described, but you're doing that.
Yeah,
You're
but people, I was in a class, healing touch class, and a nurse suddenly says, I see it, I see it. And she could see the swirling, like vortex around the throat chakra. And so people see them, people feel them. There was that Brug Joy, his beautiful book, Joy's Way, where he was a physician and he was just curious one day, putting his hand, doing abdominal palpitation, and he said, well, what does liver energy feel like? And he put his hand, you know, up above it, seeing what does liver energy feel like, and he moved it over, and all he said was like, what is this? It was, he found the solar plexus chakra. He's like, oh my God. And so that was part of his initiation, was, you know, being able to feel the chakras. And so so yeah, you know, people rediscover the chakras again and again, and it's like, when are we going to study them? I mean, oh my God. So yeah.
Well, I think you're going to answer that question about when we're going to study them.
Yeah. So
One another thing that we talked about before I started recording was the psychosphere, and
yes.
your ideas about what it might be, and that was why I was talking about measuring. You have different instruments to measure different frequencies: sound, light, magnetic. Um, you need an ultrasound, you need different machines to pick up these different frequencies that are around us all the time. You are clearly experiencing, as well as knowing, refrigerators have magnetic fields, for example, that we are immersed in magnetic fields. Why it's so valuable to get by the river or to go out in the forest, so that you can get away from the magnetic fields created by human activity, especially in big cities, but also, and even in Charlottesville, not that big, or just being in your house. These are all things that vibrate maybe not coherently with you, so you can find yourself more clearly. You can get to your basic energy signature, is what I would call it. When I go to the forest and come back, I feel better. People call it forest bathing. I think there's more to it than that, but there's something about immersing yourself in what is the energy by the river, or the energy by the ocean, or the energy in the forest. What is that? What is that?
I have seen that there's sometimes a magnetic field. I have recorded. There's a quietness in some forest. It's very much like a room that's been cleared. So you're almost in a very clear healing space. But then I've also been in spaces, for example, there's an old convent, an old Catholic school, where they have a tremendous number of these little tiny healing waves are popping. And so there's some, I call them natural healing waves, that can be in the environment. And there can be peace in the environment. So there's these two types of healing, and people have recorded these little these little magnetic field waves popping along seashores. So I think that's a big thing. I think you're experiencing natural healing waves, because there's a lot of current, you know, with all those wave, crashing and stuff. And but what I was going to say was, let's see, where am I going?
We're going. How about going into the forest as well?
Yeah, I know. There was something that occurred to me. There's that my brother bought a small farmhouse, and my mother asked him to leave it open to his two sisters to use. So I started going out there, and one day I realized, because there's much less, I'm in the city all the time, I'm surrounded by wireless. I'm here in the university here. There's wireless. It's everywhere, you know. I mean, you can't get out of it. So I went to the farm and it was a strange sensation. I thought, I can feel my soul. And so we don't use that word enough in a society, but that whole idea that there's some interference here. There's some interference in our man-made environments. But it's also blocking beneficial energies. Someone told me, I had some scientists measure the magnetic field in the science building. It's concrete blocks, and it was blocking out some of the beneficial geomagnetic field. They thought that was interesting. It was almost like a shielded environment, and that's not always healthy either. So when you're out there, you're experiencing that peaceful healing environment, also these natural healing waves. Is how I would answer it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the trees. You told me about the tree fields. Very important. We talked about that.
Well, why don't you? We didn't talk about it.
Well, the heart math is measuring the electric fields. They're looking at electric fields, but
what's the difference between electric fields and magnetic fields?
Well, they're just using a different type of instrument to detect it. So because whenever you have an electric field, you have a the perpendicular magnetic field is the theory that you always have the two. And so when you start up a current, then you have a rotating magnetic field with a current that's going straight forward. So what they're using is a voltmeter versus a magnetometer. It's just a different design to pick up two fields. And so
there are always two fields.
Yes, I would say that for me,
are mostly always
yes,
two fields.
Yes.
There's always exceptions, probably. And so when somebody says electric field, there's a magnetic field. And if someone says there's a magnetic field, there's an electric field.
And that's why they say electromagnetic fields.
They don't
EMF.
say They don't say
EMF. Yeah, EMF. But so they say EMF. It's just sort of like everything. Yeah.
The whole time we've been talking until now, you said magnetic fields most of the time.
Yes, because it's a magnetometer. Yeah.
Because it's a magnetometer. So you're defining the field by how you're measuring it, even though there's an electric field going on.
Yes.
And now I'm not so confused about electromagnetic because they're both there because they're running perpendicular to each other.
Yeah.
Thank you, Margaret Moga, for that clarification. It's bothered me for a long time.
Yeah.
And here we have it. How you're measuring it.
The psychosphere. You were asking about that.
Yeah, and let's talk about what you're thinking about with what do you mean? And there are many psychospheres, is what we both recognize. And my view is that there's one around each of us, you could say, the interpersonal ones, there's group ones, there's family ones, there's town ones, there's city ones, there's country-wise. That's the way I think about it. How do you think about the psychosphere?
Well, I've done, I think with group work, you can see in some cases some magnetic field changes. I've been with a mindfulness meditation in a group, and it was silent. There was nothing going on. But then I went down to the Monroe Institute. I recorded magnetic field with a class, the guidelines course. And in that course, very interesting, we had this strange sensation, and we were all looking at each other. We're like, my God, I feel like I know you. I feel like I know you. Everyone had that strange sensation. There was that much resonance. You were talking about resonance between people. There was so much resonance that we created a field together. I mean, it was because at some point I was walking to the kitchen. I was like, my God, I can feel this field. I can feel the field. And I grabbed my magnetometer. I brought it into the room. And of course, there's these big waves. This group is so connected just because of our frequencies. I think like you were talking about earlier, we just had these harmonious frequencies, and we had all sort of come around from around the world for this class. And it was just amazing. And it was such a big field. It went on all night because I went to bed. I left it recording. In the middle of the night, it does this little discharge thing. And the discharge was so big that they saw a light flash in the room. There's some people that had stayed up late. They saw a light flash. So I just, So there's some group situations that you can record it, but there's others that are very quiet and nothing seems to be happening.
I wonder about that with meditation groups, that they're so isolated from each other in the group.
Yes. Yes.
they're not there, they're alone together, which a lot of people experience anyway, and they're still not connected with each other. It's the connection, as well as we have to experience our own individuality, that's really important. Both, I'm separate and I'm part of something larger, and to be able to go between both of them becomes I think, a necessity for healthy living.
Yes, I teach a mind body medicine elective to medical students, and it was well designed because we do the connecting. The connecting is really part of it. Is how was your day? How was your week? You know, doing that connecting, and then we do the
Oh,
meditation. So then the meditations don't feel so isolated because we've already connected. Yeah.
oh, that's so cool.
It
Uh,
is. It is. And
uh,
students actually wrote to me and they said, "Oh, that was the best part of my week," because they did all this connecting and then they did this, quieting, and it was like, "Oh, wow, this is so cool." So,
that
yeah,
that is that
yeah,
that is so good. Sometimes I start a meeting of the Coincidence Project with one person doing a meditations where we meditate together, so we get quiet with each other, and
yes,
that's a different way of initiating the meeting, because
yes,
we're quiet in our own selves, but we've cleared ourselves some so that we
yes,
can connect better.
yes. It's true. It's true. I had one other synchronicity. I put it on my blog. I got curious about, that whole Divine Mother thing. There was Mother Mira, and then I get curious because I was raised Catholic. I was curious about these Marian apparition sites like Lourdes, Fatima, Medjugorje. So I wanted to visit one. And if you go there, have you ever been to one of those sites, or have you?
What I have done is go to Catholic churches in Europe.
Oh, okay, okay.
And
Um,
this I'm going to go to one in Denmark. I mean, they have something in them. That's as close as I've gotten to what I think you're
yes,
describing.
yes, where I'm going. Yes, yes, exactly. So I go to this site in Medjugorje, in Bosnia, and the whole place. There's been millions. I think they said millions of people have come and prayed the same prayers in the same space, and so the space has changed. It's been conditioned. We were
It's been
um,
conditioned,
like
yes.
William Tiller, the Stanford University professor who could measure conditioning of a space. Well, that's what it felt like. I went to the space. I was like, oh my God. They've changed the space by all that prayer. And it's an amazing. And so what happened was I felt like people were listening to my thoughts were being heard and my prayers were being answered immediately. It was like bizarre. It was like this living mind that was in this site, or maybe it was lots of guides. I don't know what it was. I didn't do any recordings. But I think there's certain sites on the planet where you could measure psychosphere.
Yeah, and it's coherently, and that's what you have. That's what you've just described
Coherent.
in
Mhm.
these healing places. I think the term conditioned space is a little vague. That's the trouble with it. It's like unconditional positive regard or unconditional love. It's conditioned. The condition means depending on something usually. It's not what that means there. That space is transformed by activities within it. And I wish there were a better term for it so it
Yeah.
became more evident, because the terms are important. Because I've read about Tiller, and a person, Manic, wrote a very nice book about him and the stuff that he does. And now I'm hearing it from you. It's getting a little clearer that we change spaces by what we do in them. In a home, the people in the house condition that space, maybe not in a good way, but they affect the energy within that space or the psychosphere of that space. Dances do that to the space they're in.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
Here's one that I want to ask you a question about. That person that I was doing the synchronicity talks with, and who touched me on my shoulder, and I hit the divine love button and the soul connection. Um, she's leaving the country for quite a while, and she has this day bed, something you can pull out and make a bed out of it, but it looks like a couch. And she wasn't able to sell it, so she asked me if I would take it, because she just didn't want to destroy it, because that would have been the option.
Yeah.
So she brings it over to my house. I wasn't home when it happened. And I go downstairs, and that couch was so filled with her energy that
Wow.
I
Wow.
had to I had to put a screen around it. It was so intense. I had to put a screen around it.
Yeah.
It
What type of screen? Any type of screen? Just
Well, it was bamboo stuff.
okay. Okay. Okay.
About 6 feet
Okay.
high and
Okay.
little
All right.
corners. So it shielded me from that energy. And that was like I got it about a month ago, and I've given the bed a name. It's pink. Call it the Pinkster or
Oh, interesting.
or Pinky
Interesting.
D, and we
Wow.
have a relationship. This Pinkster and I have this relationship. But
I
when
wore pink. I wore pink for you.
you wore pink for me, thank you. So when I asked her about it, she said, "Yeah, I could feel the energy off of the daybed as I left it there with you, but I couldn't feel it in my house. But because it was in a different place, I could see the difference and I could see it by itself." So, and she described the energy the way I experienced it. And I know it feels like her. It feels like
Wow.
her.
Wow. I'm glad you brought that up because I told my students that in the mind body medicine class. I said this is why people want to own homes is because then their soul expands. It's their energy, it's their space, it's their energy basically. I said their soul expands to fill the house, and you walk in. Some people they bless their house, they bless there's blessings, and you walk in the house and you go wow, wow, I can feel this person's energy. But I said I also had known that with farmers that they can love a piece of land so deeply that you can feel their soul, basically their energy on the whole property. And so I said that's why people want to buy property, want to buy houses. It allows you some expansion of your soul. You create a larger space for yourself. It's really beautiful. But anyway, it's fine.
Oh yeah. I have a little different example. I've been leasing a car for 3 years, and
Yes,
then a couple of months ago, I bought it, and it's much more my car now.
yes, yes, yes,
It's
yes.
like I'm not going to abandon it.
Yes, yes, I would never lease a car. I was like, no, it has to be yours. I actually put a lot of crystals and stuff in my car to sort of it just sort of create up my my own energy into it, the car. So so
In 1967, in Newark, New Jersey, I received a 1968 Volvo that had been shipped overseas to me to pick up. It was my 68 Volvo 122S dark blue. I call it the Bolt, or Bolt
yeah.
for short. And the car is now still in my garage from
Oh yeah. My
1967.
first car was a Volvo. I loved Volvos. Yes, okay.
So we do that with our cars. And that car, that Volvo, didn't like an Infinity that I had to get because the Volvo wasn't quite as instrumental, as useful.
Yes, yes.
Um, and it didn't like the Infinity. I could tell. I don't know how I could tell. So now it's okay with the new one. It's a Honda. It's kind of like what the Volvo is like.
Yeah, yeah, that's all. There's David Spangler talks about how we sort of enliven our space, enliven like the couch, and sort of they take on a life because of our consciousness. That the walls of the house, everything, it takes on a life. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yes,
we're coming to the end of
we could talk
our
another hour easily.
yes, we easily could. And so we're not quite over, but we 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 could talk about something. And to me, the most fascinating thing is the Earth's psychosphere, the electromagnetic field that is partly generated maybe by Schumann resonance, but that's not all of it. The ionosphere and the Earth's crust and stuff bouncing around, but so much activity is going on, including the internet in that space. between however we define, if we can, the limits of the psychosphere. I think it goes down into the earth. I think it goes fairly high. I think it shifts the way the ionosphere distance from the earth shifts. I think there's a lot of variability, but I'm interested in the content of it. And one of the things that I've noticed, and you made a reference to this, you came up with an idea, but somebody else had already come up with it. That's a common synchronicity experience where people come up with a great idea, like the psychosphere, for example. Oh, look, I got the psychosphere. It's been around for at least a century. And I didn't know that until well after I thought, well, I did the psychosphere. These ideas are floating around in the psychosphere, and that we bring them down where we're looking, we can bring them down and use them. This is an idea that I have about ideas, which are energy as well, their frequency as well. Like
Thoughts,
like,
you're talking about thoughts. You're talking about thoughts, right?
say it again.
Thoughts. I mean, there's that Jurgen Seaweed book on multidimensional man where he did various out-of-body experiences, and he comes to a level that's just thoughts interacting with each other, big thoughts, giant thoughts, and not lots of little thoughts that are hooking on to the big thoughts. And it was an amazing image that he shared. He said it was the most powerful out-of-body he'd ever had. The world of that, there is a world of thought that we're creating that also impacts us. There's a,
I'm going to get that reference from you after we
it's a
stop,
good
because
book. It's
that's
a good
what
book.
that's what I'm looking at.
Yes.
There's some other things that I'm talking about, but right now I think we need to be able to wrap this up. So, but what would you like to leave our audience with, Margaret Moga?
There's one aspect of my research that people don't that miss, and that's where these waves that are often reflect where our consciousness is localized. So the remote viewers, when they remote view at a location, that's where the magnetic field changes are. So when Bill Bengtson heals mice at a distance, the signal is not on his body. The signal is where his consciousness is focused. It's next to the mice. And so this idea that our consciousness can have perturbations at a distance where we're focused our energy. So if I'm thinking loving thoughts of my nephew, hundreds of miles away, and then suddenly 2 days later, he sent me a card saying, "Hi, Aunt Peg." It's my nickname, but it just, in other words, I had perturbed his space. And so our thoughts are that powerful. And that's why we need to use our consciousness very wisely, because we can have an influence, as you say, this giant earth psychosphere, we can have a powerful influence, and we don't know we're having it.
Our thoughts can perturb at a distance of the space of someone that we're thinking about.
Yes.
And that is an explanation for one of the most common synchronicities is I think of someone and they call me.
Yes.
And now we're getting together what we talked about earlier before we started recording, that how is synchronicity and energy related? How are biofields and synchronicity related? And you just gave a causal explanation by thoughts perturbing a biofield of another person in a way that makes that person think about you. The question I have is, what is the medium through which that perturbation
that's our big thing, is how's this what's this non-local that happens instantaneously? It's not totally instantaneously, but what is that's the part you see, because Tiller, he had a good theory. He said, we have some activity here, electromagnetic, and then it perturbs this other type of space that's connected like this, the distance, there's no distance. But then that part then has the perturbation, electromagnetic field perturbation. So there's this interaction between what's perturbed in our everyday space, and it's connected by some way at a distance, and
Well,
that's
he had a name for that space where the
yes,
temperature in the room did not
yes,
change,
yes,
although the
yes,
temperature around was
yes.
changing.
Yeah, like
Uh,
the zero vacuum space, or there's lots of different words for it. He had another name. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe it was D space. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, it's D R space. No, it's R space.
Our
And
space. It
this
was
is D.
our,
This is
and
D
we're in D
space.
space.
Yeah.
So he had, so that was so important to me,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I need to see things twice to be able to get them.
Yes.
And that R space looked to me like the transmission medium.
Yes. 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 Yes.
That,
It's he calls it reciprocal space, direct space. Yep. There's the mystery, and that's why we have to get physicists to study it. Yep.
well,
Sorry.
and before we get them to study it, we need to be able to have them. We need to be able to intuitively, subjectively recognize it. And you have created, in my mind, the idea of thought perturbing the bioenergetic field of somebody else with your face or whatever. And that gets that person to call you. They think
Yes.
about it.
No, I'm certain of it. Yeah, I'm certain.
Oh,
That
that's a wonderful space, a wonderful place to be. And because it's non-local, even though
Yes.
it's not exactly the same time, it's approximately, there is some transmission time we have to suggest.
Yeah.
It could be the person's didn't recognize it or didn't call yet. I mean,
Yes. Yes. There is a little lag. There is a little lag.
there's
Yeah.
a lag, and there's got to be a lag somewhere in this, but that's a time thing. The R space wasn't very temporal, as from what I could tell.
Right.
But that was such a clue to how the
Yes.
psychosphere operates.
Yes.
Is what I'm trying to suggest. So with that wonderful thing that we could open up a lot with, let's just say Margaret Moga, magnificent talking to Moga. So I'll tell you that.
Thank you, Bernie. This is a lot of fun. Thank you so much. And
Sure.
you've actually opened my eyes a little more to what's synchronicities are around, and I will look at it more in my research. So thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks. Okay.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.